Hey there, MRA, my Real Africanists. This is Marie Ya Jouf, the Real Africanist, and welcome to my channel. If you have been here before, I want to welcome you back. And if you are new here, I want to welcome you with open arms. And I thank you all for coming. I am glad to be here, first of all, because you are here. Secondly, because I believe the ancestors want us to be here. And lastly, because I get to do what I love to do here. And that is to talk and teach about African history, the field of African studies, and of course, current African affairs. Happy Black History Month 2023, day 13. Now let's get talking about today's topic. Okay, so today, I would like to talk about a video that our brother Jay Cameron shared uploaded yesterday, right? So the BBC video that Jay uploaded was about a trip that Pope Francis, another Catholic leader, Justin Welby, and other Christian church leaders made to southern Sudan or South Sudan on what they called a pilgrimage of peace. Okay, and my brother Jay, he had a a perspective on that, like I do too, right? And basically Jay's perspective was that why is it that it's always made to seem as if we as African people or Black people need to have European people and especially European faith leaders to mediate our affairs, right? And which I agree. So you can go over to Jay's channel and watch the rest of the video, but right off the top of the video, there was two things that were mentioned that I wanted to say something about, right? And then also there was a comment that was made on the video that I wanted to say something about, okay? First of all, Justin Welby, the Catholic leader that accompanied the Pope on the trip, right? He's a British bishop, and he is the Archbishop of Canterbury, which is basically the senior leader of the Church of England, okay? And also, at the, like I say, beginning of the video, the BBC guy who was reporting, he made sure to mention that over the past 12 years, that there has been 400,000 people who have died violently, in the clashes or in the conflict that's taking place in Sudan, right? So, I can't dispute those numbers, and I'm quite sure there may be some accuracy to them, especially since he's reporting them. And I don't want to make light of the situation at all, because I don't know enough about that situation, okay? And I don't want to offend my sisters and brothers in Sudan, because this is real life for them, okay? And I'm just talking about it. However, I would like to say a few things about what has led up, my perspective on what has led up to these conflicts, right? So also, there was a comment on Jay's on the video, and the guy, I always say guy, I don't know why, but the commenter basically said that what was going on in Sudan was a result of tribal politics, right? And the unwillingness these tribal leaders to share the wealth that is generated from Sudan's natural resources, okay? Now, he says that is behind the violence that we are now witnessing in Sudan. And he also said that African leaders are 100% responsible for this, right? And that it's not always about race and religion, as Brother Jay may have alluded to, or like many of us alluded to, right? And again, I don't want to negate or minimize the suffering of the Sudanese people, right? And I would bet to say that they're not really concerned about probably the history behind what is happening. They basically want the conflict to come to an end so their country, can be stable and they can have a stable way of life, right? However, again, the point that Brother Jay was trying to make, and that I am trying to make as well, is that you always have to put these situations and narratives into context to understand what's really happening, right? Because like what you're seeing now is really just a manifestation of what was set in motion centuries ago, right? These ethnic and tribal conflicts that the commenter alluded to didn't just happen out of nowhere. They didn't just come up out of the blue, right? In actuality, they were a result of British colonial rule, and so they were indeed a result of divisions that were created between races and religion, right? So I'm going to give you a little history about what happened and what I've learned that happened, right? So I can only speak from the perspective of what I have learned over the course of years, right? And like I say, tell you my perspective, or basically just tell you the facts as I've been told, right? Okay, so Britain colonized what we now know as Sudan, or this Sudan region, between 1899 and 1956, right? And the British colonial government, although this was one region or one nation, I would say, at that time, they ruled it as if it was two separate nations, okay? They ruled it as the North and the South, which today it is officially Sudan and South Sudan, or I want to say North Sudan and South Sudan, right? But that wasn't the case back then, right? It was not like that back then, and that has led that led to the partition of this country and what we now know today again as Sudan and South Sudan, okay? So the British, again, they ruled this one region as if it was two separate regions, okay? And they separated the mostly Arab and Arab-speaking Muslims in the north from the predominantly indigenous African population in the south, okay? And from what I can tell, the Africans in the south were of different ethnicities. They spoke different languages and they practiced different religions. And most likely, I guess, from what I can gather, this was African traditional religions and Catholicism or Christianity, okay? Now, I've noticed that in Africa, mostly, they refer to Christianity as Catholicism, or they don't make a difference between Catholicism and Protestantism, right? But here in the United States, and specifically in the Black community, when people say Christian, most oftentimes they're talking about, you are of a Protestant denomination, not of a Catholic denomination. We kind of think of those as two separate entities. Like I said, I found that that's not the case in Africa, but it is the case here. And I may be wrong on that. You can let me know. But most of the time when we say Christian, we're thinking about Protestant denominations like Baptists, Methodists, those type of denominations. We're not really talking about the Catholic denomination, although we know that it is a Christian denomination, and that the Protestants denomination actually is a offshoot, or it evolved from the Catholic denomination, right? So British rule, right? The British, right? They ruled this Sudanic region through this policy called divide and rule, okay? And through this policy called divide and rule, the British and the Arab Muslims, or they say the Arab Egyptians or the Muslim Egyptians, ruled the north and the south. So they ruled both of them through a dual system of divide and rule. But the British was the head of the system, right? They were in charge. And the Arab Egyptians ruled under their leadership and by their instructions. And like I said, I have seen this scenario so many times, all across the continent, right? This same system of just divide and conquer in some shape, form, or fashion, right? So this was right, and the Egyptians led through their under their instruction and their rule. Okay, now there was a 9-year war that predated this British colonial rule, right? And it was between the indigenous African Sudanese people, but they were ruled at that time by a Nubian ruler, but I think this Nubian ruler had converted to Islam as well, right? Like I say, sometimes these narratives are so confusing, you can't really, make them out, right? You can't really understand them, but from what I understand, this is the case, right? He was a Sufi Muslim, and if you know anything about a Sufi Muslim or a Sufi Islam, then you would know that a lot of the sects of Sufi Muslim or African people, right? African people belong to these Sufi Islamic sects, right? Okay, so like I say, this leader, he actually helped the Sudanese people defeat the British, right? And like I said, that was a year before the British took over as colonial leaders. So I'm not sure how they were able to establish colonial rule, right? That's just kind of odd. I don't know how that happened, but eventually it did happen. I'm quite sure that there was something that they exploited, some kind of relationship that they exploited in order for this to take place. Okay, so this divide and rule strategy, after the British took over and became the colonial rulers of the Sudanese region at the time, this strategy favored the North, right? So in other words, the British invested very heavily in the North, right? And I mean, so as far as like infrastructure, modern infrastructure, technology, the school systems, even the building of mosques and the supporting of pilgrimages to Mecca. I believe that You know, these colonial powers actually, like I said, it had invested very heavily in the North, while they neglected the South, which was predominantly African and indigenous, right? And this is weird, right? It's weird because here you have a European Christian or Catholic nation. I'm talking about the UK and Britain, right? Investing into an Arab Muslim nation, right? And these two people or groups historically have been at odds with one another, or have been enemies, open enemies of one another, right? So this is really odd. However, there is some work out there by historian and author Walter Williams, I believe is his name, and in one of his books, I think it's called The Historical Origin of Islam, he basically lays the framework or the foundation, or he puts the theory out there that actually Islam is just really an evolution of Christianity, right? So it's really one of the same, just like Christianity, Protestant Christianity branched off from Catholicism. In Dr. Williams' work, he believes that Islam is just really a derivative of Christianity, right? And also that the founders of this religion are basically European people, right? So, that's a debate and that's a theory, but if you are able to read some of his work, I think it's the historical origin of Christianity as well as the historical origin of Islam. He lays out some pretty interesting theories. That's what I'll say, and I'll leave it at that. Because I understand, it's kind of challenging to talk about religion, because everybody is entitled to their religious beliefs. However, as it pertains to Africa, it has to be talked about, because it is so intertwined with the history of why, what happened in Africa, and why we continue to deal with these issues today, right? It goes hand in hand with the oppression, the enslavement, the colonialism, as well, again, as the issues that we continue to battle against today. Okay, so again, I don't want to offend anybody by talking about it, but it has to be talked about if we're going to come to a place in African history where we have some semblance of peace and prosperity, right? And that's what we all want. We want peace, we want progress, and we want prosperity for Africa. That's the Africa we want. Okay? So back to what I was talking about, right? So again, they were building school systems, they were building mosques, they were building, they were just building the North Sudan up, okay? And like I said, the one thing that I'm always interested in is the education. So I have seen, right, or I have heard or read that the school systems in the North were basically, Arab, Egyptian instruction, right? And so also don't get confused when I say Egyptian, because when I say Egyptian, I'm not talking about the black Egyptians or Egyptians as we know it. Like I say, these are the way, this is the way, I'm sorry, I keep stumbling. This is the way that they confuse you, right? They use these terms Egyptian or the Egyptian government, like the video I did just the other day, and I was talking about how they say the Sudanese government, when actuality, these are not the people that we think that they are talking about. They are talking about people that have come into this area and who have taken over these areas from the indigenous African people. Okay, so when you are doing any type of research, and if these narratives are saying like it could say at the time the Namibian government, or at the time the Congolese government, but at the time it could have been a European government that was governing. It could have been an Arab government that was governing. So you get it? So you really have to, again, go deeper and, kind of put the pieces together when you are doing research about African history, because that's just how it goes, okay? So anyway, I thought that was pretty weird that these British historically Christian people were investing so heavily in this Arab and Muslim nation, okay? But so we talked about, right, that they utilized this divide and rule, in the north, right? So in other words, the north ruled the north as well as the south through this divide and rule, okay? But then you have in the south where the ruling government, the British ruling government, used what we call the indirect rule. And the indirect rule that was used in the south divided the south into small, like hundreds of small chiefdoms, right? And they ruled through the chiefs of these chiefdoms, right? Or through what we know as the tribal leaders, okay? So that's the ethnicity part, or the tribal part, that I was referring to when I was responding to the comment about these conflicts being a result of tribal leaders, okay? So now you see that these tribes and these divisions in ethnicity were also created by these outside entities, or by this British foreign rule, right? So, and I'm quite sure, right, that the chiefs and the leaders that they chose to rule were chose intentional, okay, based upon like physical qualities and their beliefs in things that the British considered noteworthy, is the only way I could put it, right? I don't know how they choose these certain leaders, but I'm quite sure that that again there was some kind of qualities that they used to determine who would be in charge, okay? And so through this indirect rule, they created these hierarchies, okay? Which also caused ethnic division between these different tribal leaders, okay? But this indirect rule and this divide and rule in the north, this caused undevelopment of the south, okay, of the southern region of Sudan, right? So now you have this northern region that is prospering and developing and growing, right? And then you have the southern region, which is not, okay? And also, from what I can tell, there was some trade going on between these northern and southern regions. And I'm quite sure, again, that was something that was exploited, and that was something that was benefiting the British people, okay? However, at the time, right, later on, in this time period, the British, what am I trying to say? The British stopped the northern rulers from trading with those in the south, or doing business with those in the south, which was another thing that actually led to their undevelopment, okay? So as things went on, right, eventually in 1956, Sudan gained its independence, okay? But gained the independence, which left these two, left as one nation, but that had been governed separately, right? And so you had the North, who was more stable, more better, well off financially, and who was used to ruling. Okay, so now you have this South that was made up of all of these different tribes and ethnicities and chiefdoms, right? Who also now were, used to ruling. Okay. You see how it's all mixed up and how they, divide all of this stuff up and cause all of this chaos, okay? So the North, of course, they were not willing to give up their position of authority and their position of rulership, okay? And neither were these different tribal or ethnic leaders in the South, okay? Although they had no power over the North at all. So this led to just years of infighting in this region, right? This led to a number of wars or conflicts or civil wars, or or whatever you want to call it, right? But in the late 1970s, oil was discovered in southern Sudan, which kind of shifted the dynamics, right? So now that gave southern Sudan some bargaining power, right? It gave them a boost in their economic situation. However, you have these different ethnic and tribal leaders who are used to governing, right? So I'm quite sure that caused some more conflict and some more problems among these southern tribal leaders, and not only between the southern chiefs and leaders, also between the North and the South, right? Because like I said, you used to being in charge, you are used to having the upper hand and being the one with the financial security. Now you have this lower region who also has a chance to improve their financial security and be on the come up, right? So like I said, after that happened, okay, I think it was let me see, like I said, it was 1956 when Sudan gained its independence, okay? But in the late 70s, the oil was discovered, right? And I'm quite sure you all remember, if you're around my age, you kind of remember what was happening at that time when the oil was discovered. I think the first oil was exported in, I think it was maybe 1999, right? So, or 1989, something like that. It took a while for the first I guess batch of oil or whatever you want to call it to be exported. Now, why it took so long, I don't know, but I'm quite sure again that these now neo-colonial powers had their hands in the pot, okay, and that they had some kind of control with different companies and things that were already integrated into Sudanese society, okay? And southern Sudan, right, kept pushing for their independence from Sudan. So they wanted to become an independent nation because they felt that the leaders, the Arab leaders or the northern leaders, were still favoring the North and investing more heavily in the North instead of in the South, right, where the mostly indigenous African population live, And I think, like I say, I think everybody's old enough to remember what happened in Darfur and what continues to happen in Darfur today, right? And that was all a result of these issues that had taken place in the past and had led up to this time, okay? So about 30 years ago, President al-Bashir came into power, right? And the West, or the Western powers, blamed al-Bashir for the problems that continue to exist over these years up to now, right? So al-Bashir was taken out in a coup maybe about 2 years ago, and he came back for a little while, but he's no longer there now. I think he may be in jail now, but I know he's no longer the leader of Sudan, right? Of northern Sudan, okay? However, uh, what I was gonna, okay, yeah. However, while al-Bashir was in office, like I say, most people pointed to him as part of the problem, right? Now, I'm not sure. I can't validate that he was the problem, right? Like I say, it's so many dimensions. I'm quite sure that led to that up until the time that Bashir was in office, and even after. During his tenure in office, right? But he was in office for 30 years. And again, they say that the Sudanese, the indigenous Sudanese people, are the people in the south, as well as in the west, in Darfur, as well as in the east, and that would be closer to Ethiopian. Like I say, I don't know what that region is called now. I'm not sure, okay? But they said that all of these regions, again, were still complaining that most of the investment in Sudan would go to the northern region, and the southern region continued to suffer, okay? However, I also found out that during his 30 years in office, okay, during Bashir's 30 years of office, 20 of those years, he was Sudan was under sanctions by the United States, right? And these sanctions were supposedly because, again, the belief that al-Bashir's leadership and his administration was the one that was causing all of these problems. Now, like again, I say I'm not sure if that was the case. I don't know what he did. But I would like to say, this is the same kind of thing that President Mugabe in Zimbabwe complained about, right? So you have people, the Zimbabwe people, throwing darts and stones at Mugabe, because of what they claim is, corruption, lack of leadership, and all of these things, right? But then after Mugabe passes away, we find out that, for a great extent of time while he was in office, right, the United States had Zimbabwe under sanctions, right, which basically makes it impossible. If you can't trade with the rest of the world, it makes it impossible for you to feed your people or to stabilize your economy, because I hear it a lot that this is a global nation now. This is a global nation now. But this has been this is a global world now, right? But this has been a global world, right? Based upon just what I said, just what I've been talking about, you can tell that this is a global world. It's been a global world. People have been trading, different races and nationalities and ethnic groups have been trading with people for thousands and thousands of years, right? So this it didn't just become a global economy, right? But those are the little key words, or what would you call those words were like sound bites that they use to make people think that this is something new, especially since China is kind of ruling the game now. So the West wants you to think, oh, it's a global world now, so China is taking over. But like I say, the more I research, the more I realize again that there's nothing new under the sun, right? There may be different levels of things that are new, but basically what's going on now has been going on in a different shape, form, or fashion, okay? So again, I would like to say that I don't know what has been happening in Sudan or under the al-Bashir government, but if you are under sanctions for 20 years, right, if you are under sanctions for 20 years, then I can see why it may be difficult, even if you want to invest in the South or the West and the East, why it would be difficult for you to be able to do that, especially if you only have enough to invest in your own people. You know, most people are going to side with their people. And also, from what I understand, al-Bashir is a part of the ethnic group that was favored by the British, right? He was one of the groups that were mainly in control while the British was in office, right? Or why the British was controlling those regions. So all of that plays a part, right? And why these religious leaders, and why we have all of these ethnic divisions. And I would like to say one more thing also. While the British was supporting the Arab Muslims in the north, it is said that the Christian missionaries were trying to support the indigenous Africans in the South, right? So they were the ones that were responsible for building schools in the South, and also, I guess, tending to social issues in the South. And again, I don't think that that's a coincidence. And I also believe that that was strategic, right? Because it was an effort to prevent the spread of Islam, okay, into the South. And again, I don't know how it ties itself together, but I'm quite sure it ties itself together. There was an interest in preventing the spread of Islam into the South, right? And these Christian missionaries that were in the South, they were, from what I can tell, members of the Catholic community, right? So that's what I'm saying. I mean, you never know. The British could have been behind that too, or the French could have been behind that. The enemy of the British at the time, or the Italians could have been behind that. You never know, because the fight is always between the European powers and the Arab powers over who are going to control Africa, right? Who are going to control the natural resources that belongs to the African people, okay? So that's normally how it goes, right? So basically, really, that's all I wanted to say on that. I just wanted to put my 2 cents in on that, and to say that's why we need to have our own independent platforms where we can teach about our history and our culture, because it has been so misconstrued and distorted in mainstream education and media that we need our own. So that's what I do. I am Marie Ya Jouf. I am a historian. I am a blogger, a writer, and education activist is what I call myself. And I am the creator of the Aspect Model. And the Aspect Model, ASPECT, is the African System of Progressive Education and Communication Techniques, right? It is a 4-tier, strategically aligned system that I designed to create products, processes, and independent platforms to teach on Africa, right? And so if you are interested in the Aspect Model, I'll leave a link below to my blog at therealafricanist.com, and you can click on that link and go over there and learn more about the Aspect Model, right? And so the reason why I call it the Aspect Model is because I don't believe that learning your history and your culture and learning about current affairs is going to solve all of our problems as Black people, right? Or as African people. I don't believe that that is our key to liberation, right? But I believe that it is a very important aspect of that liberation, right? Because if you don't know what happened then how are you going to solve the problem now? Again, nothing just comes up out of the blue. Everything has a history, right? Everything that you are today, everything that you're doing, who you are today is a result of years and years of happenings, right, to create this moment in your life. And that's exactly how it is when it comes to world affairs, right? So again, thank you for listening, and you can find me here at the Real Africanist. You can find me on my blog at therealafricanist.com. Again, don't forget the Can't Ban Black Challenge to post African history facts, figures, information across social media and on your social media platform, and use the hashtag #Can'tBanBlack, breaking the ban. African history is Black history, and of course the hashtag the Real Africanist. Again, thank you for listening, and if you have some comments, please leave them down in the comments section, because again, I'm here to learn, just like I am here to talk and to teach. It's a two-way conversation, and I don't know everything, and I'm quite sure that people who live in Africa and who may have experienced some things that I don't know about can tell me some things that I don't know, right? So this is not a monopoly on knowledge over here, right? We all know something, and we can all add something to the conversation. So please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and also hit that notification button so when I put out my next video, you'll be the first to know. Okay, have a great day, and I will see you soon.